Hey YouTube. What's up? Morning now. I'm in a weird mood today, so it's a good day to film. For many years before the tubes of you, or even before dumb phones were a thing, I was in what I would call a counter-cult ministry, and it all started with two nice Jehovah's Witnesses who came to my door and caused quite the domino effect. But not like what you'd think. They got me in quite the theological chokehold that caused me to actually read and study my Bible, which made me realize that the beliefs that I had were New Age, New Thought, and not biblical, which then I repented of, but then realized that what my J-dubs were believing wasn't biblical either, so what's up with that? And then that caused me to go down the wonderful rabbit hole of learning about Jehovah's Witnesses, mind control, and cults. And this actually taught me a lot. It taught me a lot of people skills, how to challenge someone with differing beliefs without being an absolute jerk about it, and how to love them while still disagreeing with them. It taught me when to hold my ground and when to own my mistakes and how not to own someone else's reaction to my challenges to them. In other words, if they get mad at me because I'm being a provoking jerk, then that's on me. But if they get mad at me because I've kindly challenged their beliefs and they're big mad about it, then that's on them. But all of this also taught me a lot about cults. What are they? What makes a cult? What are the methods they use? Why do people fall for this? And so much more. I learned that critical thinking is quite important in aligning your beliefs with reality. I learned that there are very smart and very wonderful people that get taken captive by cults. So I thought I'd make a video telling you the things I learned from people much smarter than me in hopes of helping you become smarter. So let's start with the basics. What makes up a cult? I hear lots of people throwing around the word cult like people do the word love or narcissism. It's just sort of lost its meaning because it's so overused and misunderstood, in my opinion. First, let me just tell you what a cult is not, all right? Someone that has different beliefs than you does not equal that they are then in a cult. This is probably the correlation I hear the most, and it's just simply not true all the time or even fair. If anything, this is a fallacy to just dismiss what the other person is saying and an easy and lazy way out of not having to think about your own position. Second, a cult isn't just some small group of people in a house far, far away with tinfoil hats on and Kool-Aid in the fridge. The scary truth is that anybody can be involved in a cult. Really, really intelligent people have been involved in cults. But there are actually specifics for what makes up a cult. They're characterized by several key elements that set them apart from mainstream groups. First, they typically feature a charismatic leader or more who possesses qualities like charm, confidence. They're hilarious. Second, another aspect of cults is they often adhere to an exclusive belief system that includes extreme religious doctrines, conspiracy theories, apocalyptic prophecies. Members are sometimes isolated either physically or psychologically from the outside world, and it fosters a dependency on the group for social and emotional support. Control over information is another hallmark of cults. They tightly regulate access to outside information and discourage critical thinking. Cults exercise behavior control as well, dictating sometimes daily routines, your relationships, who you can talk to, even dress codes. There are also thought control tactics such as thought stopping and black and white thinking. Both of these are used to manipulate members' thoughts and beliefs. And then there's emotional manipulation, which is employed to keep members obedient with fear, guilt, shame, promises of love and acceptance. Those are common tools. Now I'm going to elaborate more on each of these through what's called the BITE model, which is control over behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions. This was developed by a man named Stephen Hassan, who is a cult expert, and he has a very interesting story and background of being in a cult himself called the Moonies. You might have heard of them. I respect much of his work and find it to be very valuable. And when I first learned about this model back in the day, I actually thought it was quite brilliant. Mind control was my favorite thing to teach on when I talked about the Jehovah's Witnesses, and was always the first thing I started with because I needed Christians to understand why Majeda was so resistant to facts, even if it was presented to them right in front of their faces, yet still flat out rejected it. And of course, this isn't confined to just Jehovah's Witnesses. They were just the catalyst that I first learned about these behaviors. This model is also easy to remember, and when compared to high control groups, it's like it fits like a glove. Now, keep in mind, everything that I'm going to share with you is not isolated to just religion and spirituality. This is found in social and political movements as well. All right, now the first thing that we're going to go over in the BITE model is behavior control. Behavior control in cults involves regulating and manipulating the actions and conduct of members to establish compliance and dependence on the group. They might implement strict rules, guidelines like dress codes. They tell you what you can and can't wear, what color hair you can have, and just overall dictate your entire look. There might even be specific clothing, uniforms, symbols that identify them as part of the group. There's restrictions on contact with outsiders. Members might be discouraged or prohibited completely from associating with friends, family, or anyone who is not part of the group. They make the person feel like they will take them away from the group, from the truth, right, that the group has. This group has the truth, they have the truth, and they're trying to take you away from it and impose a sense of superiority within the group, and anyone outside should be either feared or seen as a threat. There can be a regulation of sleep patterns or even what they can and can't eat. Some cults enforce sleep deprivation or dictate when members should sleep and when they should wake. They keep them so busy and so tired. The last thing I'll mention, which I talked about before, is the rigid expectation to adhere unquestioningly to authority. If you go against them, you might as well be going against God. This can seriously affect, by the way, how somebody sees God. They gain the trust of other people, and this is a key factor. They often claim unique special knowledge or divine connections. But here is a huge red flag for you. These leaders demand unquestioning devotion from their followers. You're not allowed to question them. Any dissent or criticism is met with punishment or emotional manipulation. It's not seen as like, oh, bummer, darn, Jimmy doesn't agree with me. Oh, well, let's just go be pals and grab dinner. No, you have to agree with the leader or else you're not invited to the pizza party. Guys, if you are in a church, a political group, or even a social group online, and you're not allowed to question what you've been told by the leadership or influencer or whoever it is, or you'll be looked at as the enemy, that's a huge red flag. Questions are not the enemy. Not allowing answers is. Not allowing truth is. And look, here's the thing. If truth harms your beliefs, then your beliefs are not grounded in truth, and it deserves to be examined. And if someone is speaking truth to you, all right, and say you don't like it and you reject it, that's a whole other problem. But to be in a group where you're taught and told something by leadership and you actually want to test it or are critically thinking about what they're saying and ask questions but are shamed or silenced when you do, this is me giving you permission to do the opposite and question those leaders. All questions aren't allowed. Only approved questions are, to give you the illusion of free thought. You are manipulated into blind obedience. There can be an expectation on you to ask the leaders or leader for permission to make any big life decisions like getting married, buying a home, moving, having kids, and much more, leading to a really unhealthy dependence on the leader. This is also true of secular cultish movements, I've noticed. You do what they say and follow their lead, or you are shunned from that group. You're not just in simple disagreement with them, and they still love you and you love them in that disagreement. Oh no. You can form, or you're now the enemy. Now, next on the BITE model is information control. And I have to say, this is one of my favorites because I find it so fascinating and probably the easiest to spot, in my opinion. Information control can come in a few forms. Basically, it's limiting the access to information that's not sympathetic or in agreement with the group's ideology. You're not allowed to look at anything critical of the group. They will promote the cult's own beliefs and ideology as the sole source of truth. In other words, they will not say to you, hey, go ahead and really look at all sides of this. Do your homework, ask lots of good questions, and research. Look for the truth and go with that no matter what. And use your free thinking and brain to do so. No, they will not say that. They'll say something like, sure, you can ask all the questions you want, but here's a list of the approved questions you can ask and the approved spaces and people to talk to about this. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a Christian and I do think that there's certain spiritual sources that can feed into me as a Christian and give me good Christian advice. But that does not mean that there's somebody that's not a Christian that doesn't have some sort of wisdom to offer. It's that discernment. It's understanding what is true and what is not. And then my ability to discern and look for information from a variety of sources. Cults don't allow that. They make you afraid to do that. Critical reading and research is discouraged and prohibited. So picture it. You're surfing the net and come across something that looks like it's critical of your group's beliefs. You immediately remember a recent conversation with another group member or leader where they have said that you should always avoid looking at critical information because these critics are just full of hate, they're demonized, or not as enlightened as you are. This includes reading books, articles, websites that are critical of the cult's beliefs. So I wear many hats in ministry. I do satire, theology, Christian stuff, cultural stuff. But as an apologist, that's exactly what you do. You go and you look at the critical information against Christianity because you want to know what's true. You test everything. What are they saying? Is it true? Because if it's true, that's where we should go. But as an apologist, to know what you believe and why you believe it involves going out and looking at what other people believe and why they believe it. It involves critical analysis of your position. There's also an isolation of members from outsiders. I talked about this a little bit before, and they do this from friends, family, or others who might offer alternative perspectives or support their exit from the group. There's a distortion of information to make the group's beliefs more acceptable, which includes misquoting sources or withholding information. And then there's the propaganda. Oh, the propaganda. If the only information you are forced to see or even allow yourself to see is from the group or cult, then they can say anything. And because they are the source of higher truth, the member believes it. So if reality says one thing and the group denies it and redefines it and says, no, this is what's real, then you are basically believing a delusion given from the group as if it were true. This is also how the Bible is distorted. And guys, let me just rant for just a second. Without exception, every cult or high control religious group always distorts the Bible. You will never see them say, here's the Bible. Read it on your own and think for yourself and see what it says. No, there's always a reinterpretation of the plain text to fit the preconceived ideas of the group, or there's always a reliance on feelings. More on that in just a little bit. And guys, honestly, I'll be the first to admit that not everything in the Bible is super clear, but I have to say that that's in the minority and it doesn't have any weight on the message of the Bible, major core doctrines, or the gospel itself. Majority of the Bible is pretty straightforward and simple. That's the idea. The gospel is supposed to be simple. And why is it always the Bible? Why don't I ever see any of these groups take, like, I don't know, the Bhagavad Gita or something like that, the Quran, the Book of Mormon? Like, why is it always a distortion of the Bible? Here's my theory. Because nobody tries to counterfeit fool's gold. Nobody tries to distort a bootleg copy of a movie or video game. Nobody tries to distort what's already distorted or twist something that doesn't have an eternal effect on the location of your soul. And honestly, the devil just overplays his hand sometimes, I tell you. The point is that if information is distorted, people wouldn't know any better because they're not allowed to compare what they're being told with another source. So controlling information means promoting the group's teachings as the only valid knowledge. Cults often emphasize that their ideology is the only valid source of truth discouraging members from questioning or seeking alternative viewpoints. Now notice that it's what they see as truth. This is what's so interesting to me about our weird cultural turn towards relativism and postmodernism. It's not even a wrong turn. We've gone off the road. We are in a ditch and are burning in the black abyss. When people are aligned with reality, this means that they have truth. It's very, very simple. But if truth is inconvenient, what do? You convince people that truth is found in them or their ideologies. If you're in a religious space, another group, or even a college classroom, and you're not allowed to put forth another viewpoint or have an open dialogue because the environment you're in only allows one viewpoint, this is a red flag. Another thing that's kind of interesting and sad at the same time is that cults use something called confession to manipulate members. This is where you're put in a situation where you trust the company you're around and you share personal information that is then later used against you. Or you're manipulated into remembering something correctly. No, that's not the way it happened. Let us help you remember it correctly. Now, next on the BITE model is thought control. Thought control tactics are designed to shape members' thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes to align with the cult's ideology and the leader's directives. This basically means demanding absolute loyalty. Members are required to pledge unwavering loyalty to the cult's leader or doctrine, often to the detriment of their own critical thinking. Critical thinking is almost always downplayed and looked at as a vice. Your mind is a bad thing, and truth is found in the leadership or inside you. This one's huge. I've seen some really manipulative arguments for this, where some people will say, oh no, we are critical thinking. Let's join our group. We critically think over here. And then out of the other side of their mouth, discourage it at the same time. It's very gaslighty and very confusing. This is something I want everybody to pay attention to, the discouragement of critical thinking, all right? Many people are taught what's called thought-stopping techniques, which shut down reality testing by stopping negative thoughts and allowing only positive thoughts. So if it's not something positive about your group, don't entertain it. Cults and high control groups often discourage members from questioning the teachings or the authority of the leader, as we've already gone over, but they label this as disobedience. You're not as spiritual, you're not as smart or respected if you use your brain. The reason why this is done is very obvious. If you start thinking about what you're being taught, then you might wake up and leave the garbage behind. They can't have that. This is one huge way I see people being controlled. Everyone should take a critical thinking or logic class, in my opinion. On this note, one particularly interesting part of thought control is loaded language. Think of this as if words were people with really low emotional intelligence. These are words or phrases that are filled with emotions, meant to evoke strong emotional reactions or to manipulate people's opinions. This appeals to people's emotional faculties, not their mental ones. No wonder they want you using your emotions and not your brain. In other words, it's not meant to get you to critically think. They're meant to shut down your thinking capabilities and make you upset. These are words and phrases groomed for this sort of thing. The words chosen are designed to provoke an emotional response. It's done on purpose, and then it's supposed to influence the listener's perception through that emotion. Now, kind of piggybacking off of this, another aspect of language that's really interesting is when these groups have like their own language that can be loaded as well, and they have their own meaning altogether. As an example, religious cults, all right, in particular, this is how they create their own sectarian Bibles to fit their theology, and it's filled with unique words and phrases that are unique to that particular sect. Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, notoriously have their own translation of the Bible made by Jehovah's Witnesses for their theology. And guys, be very skeptical of any group that has made their own Bible version. Another aspect is labeling dissent as sinful or harmful. Any form of doubt or criticism maybe labeled as evil, sinful, or dangerous to dissuade members from questioning the group. Then there's black and white thinking. This is where cults promote like an us versus them mentality, where their beliefs are portrayed as the only truth, fostering a very narrow and dogmatic worldview. Many times it's not that simple, all right? People tend to default to this position because of the many things I've already discussed. They don't want to be seen as an outsider, so they fall into the trenches of black and white thinking. Then there's the discouragement of discussion. You're only to affirm the beliefs you've been taught and not entertain another perspective. We've mentioned this a few times. It's almost like a hostage situation though, where you're unable to really share how you feel on the inside out of fear or scrutiny or being shunned by the group. Now, last on the bite model is emotional control. Now, I've mentioned this before, but emotional controls are the tactics aimed at keeping you obedient. It's manipulating your emotions. You don't want your followers to rely on objective truth. No. You want them to rely on their feelings, whether it's positive or negative. Why? Because feelings are way more easy to manipulate. Therefore, it's easier to control the member. Now, one of the things I remember learning about was love bombing, and I'm sure a few of you know what this is, but cults often shower new recruits with excessive affection, attention, and praise to create a sense of belonging and attachment. And here's the thing, I don't think there's anything wrong with being welcoming, guys. I don't think that every greeter at church or Chick-fil-A is guilty of love bombing. It's the excessive and conditional love and affection given to new recruits as if they will never be loved and more accepted more than they are in this group. And everyone on the outside can't and won't fulfill this. Then there's the shaming and guilt tactics. Members are made to feel guilty or ashamed for any perceived failures, doubts, disobedience, which then reinforces their dependency on the group for redemption. There's a push to create dependency on the group, and cults will provide that emotional support, belonging, and purpose to members, making it difficult for them to imagine leaving the group or living without them. And this is done in a very manipulative way. It's very abusive or toxic. Honestly, what it reminds me of is an abusive relationship. It reminds me of Mother Gothel in the movie Rapunzel, like that really toxic relationship. Nobody else will love you like I will. You can't leave, and the toxic bond is formed, and it can be very powerful. Another aspect is that your entire identity is found in the group. You are nobody without them, and fear is a huge factor to stay. Fear tactics are so effective in making someone obedient to the group or leader. There's fear of independent thinking, being shunned, losing your salvation, and much more. I've learned that if you can make people very afraid, or that you've heard from God, you can make them believe just about anything. All right, so that is the bite model. Now, there are a few things I want you guys to keep in mind about this model. Some of these things, if isolated, do not indicate you're part of a cult. So, for example, I actually had a young girl describe her job as a cult because the job required that workers have a dress code and had to do what their boss said. I had to laugh a little bit because they conflated having a job and responsibilities with a boss with cult-like behavior. Not the same thing. Another one, for example, is say in emotional control, right? There's a fear of losing friends if you leave the group, but honestly, this is quite literally true of any group out there. Just ask any high schooler. There's a need to take these as a collective whole and think about if you know of a religion or group that fits these, because this is what mind control is. Now, let me kind of elaborate a little bit more on mind control itself. Everything that we just went over basically is mind control. It's how you control people. But I say that mind control is not the same thing as brainwashing. That's another term that's, I think, been just overused so much that people forget that it actually has a specific definition and meaning and practice. It fits in its own bucket. To put it simply, brainwashing is forced. In mind control, you're coerced. You're tricked. And this is mostly how cults operate. Think of the difference between Orwell's 1984 and like the Truman Show. So mind control involves a systematic and coercive process aimed at gaining control over people's thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and beliefs. So as a Christian, when I was learning about mind control and cults, there was one thing that consistently puzzled me. And I had to use 100% of my brain to figure this out, so go with me here. I always wondered why the specific similarities. How can one high control cult group who's never even heard of another one have these same exact things in common to even make them a cult? Like, in other words, they all have the same bite criteria, like they've been cheating off each other's paper, but they've never even been in the same classroom. How does this happen? Well, I think there are a few reasons. All right, so just humor me for a second. First, there's just no doubt in my mind that this is spiritual. In fact, these sorts of correlations and patterns fascinated me so much that it only reinforced my belief in God and that objective truth exists. And second, piggybacking off of that, I find that the more we as a society or as people get away from truth, the more susceptible people are to mind control. I am absolutely shooketh to see how much the world has changed in 10 short years. What used to be confined to religious cults is now found throughout our society. There's a reason why Jesus describes Satan specifically as the father of lies. He doesn't call him the father of another religion, of fake politics, or even the father of hate or negativity. He sits on a throne of lies. Jesus claims to be the way, the truth, and the life. When we take away the foundation of these virtues, God, because we want to go our own way, then all of a sudden, it's anything goes. Truth is then defined by who has the power. Can you see how that's a ripe breeding ground for mind control? You can't have a standard for any of this unless God exists. And all of this is based on what's true or false. If it's true, then it can stand on its own and won't crumble under examination. But if God does not exist, there is no truth, there is no objective moral standard, and every cult in the world can't be wrong. So there's actually a lot more to know about this. If you want to check out the description, there will be more information there, including a series I did on the Jehovah's Witnesses. But let me know your thoughts. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think I missed something? Let me know in the comments below. I know so many of you click on videos like this and ask so many questions because you're wanting to learn more and dig deeper. I want to tell you all about my seminary, Southern Evangelical Seminary, where I received my bachelor's in religious studies, and I am currently, very slowly, a student getting my master's in Christian apologetics. Many people, including myself, are indebted to SES for their no-nonsense stance on biblical and objective truth. They have helped strengthen my Christian walk by holding me accountable scripturally and theologically. If you'd like more information on this, go to ses.edu/Melissa. They offer all kinds of degrees and certificates, so be sure to check them out.